how do we become mindful? This is the question. And one of the most important ways, Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu udhkurullaha dhikran kathira. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ ذِكْرَ تَنْفَعَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Remind them. In other words, call their mind to attentiveness, to attention. Remind them, because reminders benefit the believers. In other words, they will become mindful by being reminded, by being brought back to reality. And so the Prophet ﷺ, one of his names is Al-Mudhakkir, the one who reminds, who brings you back to your mindfulness, to your remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I had a teacher, he was a beautiful teacher. He was a Sudanese, Sheikh Ahmed Badwi, Tayyib al-Asma. And I read with him the Muwatta. He was a student of Muhammad Habibullah Wad Mayab. So I had a direct connection to one of the greatest muhaddithin of the 20th century. He was a Mauritanian, brilliant Mauritanian scholar, who when he went to Al-Azhar and he wanted to teach in the masjid, so all the Azharis wanted to test him. So when they came in, he said, let's do ta'arruf. And so the first one said, I'm Sheikh so-and-so. He said, Ibn Man. He said, 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 that's as far as I go back. Each one gave all their lineage. And he began by giving his lineage. So when he finished, he said, Salaam alaikum, Fulan ibn Fulan ibn Fulan. Salaam alaikum, Fulan ibn Fulan ibn Fulan. Salaam alaikum, Fulan ibn. And he went through all of them. And when it came to him, he said, Man ana. And none of them could repeat his lineage. So they said, you can teach hadith. So he studied with him. He was a mufti in the UAE in the court when I was a student there. But he wrote a little book, which he designed it so that if you did these, you would be from the dhakirin Allah dhikran kathira. And when I told Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya that we had translated this book, Dr. Asad and I, that he said his father used to say, whoever does these dhikrs, they're called ad'iyat rahwal, the munasabat, the occasional supplications. He said, whoever does them on a regular basis will be written from the dhakirin Allah dhikran kathira. So this is a beautiful way to become mindful, is to try to remember and to habituate ourselves to these things, but also to do them with intention. In other words, not formulaic and not perfunctory, not in some way in which you go onto automatic pilot, where you actually stop and you supplicate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Salama said, the Prophet ﷺ said, never left the house except he said, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika nadilla aw dalla, aw azilla aw zalla, aw adrima aw adrama, aw ajhala aw yujhala alayya. This is a perfect prayer. And I know of no other religion that has these prayers. I don't know any other religion that has these prayers. It's to me one of the proofs of our Prophet ﷺ is that all of these prayers are so stunningly beautiful. They're very difficult to translate because they're so comprehensive. He said, Utitu jawami al-kalam. I was given the comprehensive words. He says so much with so few words. So when he went out, he said, Oh Allah, I seek refuge that I should trip or be tripped, that I should go astray or be led astray, that I should oppress anyone or be oppressed, or wrong anyone or be wronged, that I should become angry or foolish, or somebody should display their anger or foolishness on me, against me. That's a protective dua as you go out. When he went to relieve himself, he said, Allahumma inna a'udhu bika min al-khubthi wal khaba'ith. Because these are foul things, like emptying yourself, even though nothing foul came from the Prophet ﷺ. And the earth swallowed up. The Prophet ﷺ, when he came out, he said, Ghufranaka, your forgiveness. And then he said, Alhamdulillah alladhi razaqani laddatu wa abqa fi quwwatu wa adhhaba anni adahu. What a perfect dua. Praise be to the one who provided me the delight of the food, retained in me the energy of the food, and removed from me the harm of the food. These are perfect prayers. Perfect prayers. So all of these things that the Prophet ﷺ, when he went to bed, Bismika Allahumma amutu wa ahya. In another riwayah, which is muttafaqun alayh, he actually says that أسلمت نفسي إليك, I have surrendered myself to you. وفوضت أمري إليك, I have given my whole affair to you. وألجأت ظهري إليك, and put my back to you, in other words, for protection. رغبة ورهبة إليك. And then he says, I believe in you, I believe in your Prophet. And the Prophet ﷺ said that whoever says these things and then dies has died on fitrah. This is the real human being. This is the fitrah. So, وضعت جنبي وبك أرفعه فإن أمسكت نفسي فارحمها وإن أرسلت فاحفظها. He said, go to sleep and not expect to get up in the morning. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This is attentiveness to time. People die in their sleep. We don't know. We're living in a place, earthquakes happen. The house could collapse. لا قدر الله سلمكم الله جميعا. When waking from sleep, I slept in the tent of Murabit al-Hajj for the first few months that I was with him, and then I actually asked because it was very intense. He did dhikr all the time. He did dhikr in his sleep, and I've only seen a few people that do dhikr in their sleep. There was one man, Sidi Ali, in Maknas, who I was with him, and he was sleeping and snoring and doing prayer on the Prophet ﷺ. And he was fast asleep. So, I mean, I saw that with my own eyes. But Murabit al-Hajj used to say, La ilaha illallah. The Prophet said, Aini tanamu wa qalbi la yanam. My eye sleeps, but my heart doesn't sleep. So there's people that do dhikr so much that they're even in their sleep, they're doing dhikr. In fact, Sahaba used to have to put rocks when they went to the bathroom. They would put rocks in their mouth to remind themselves not to say the name of Allah. So every time the Murabit al-Hajj got up, the very first thing he would do, Alhamdulillah, alladhi ahyani ba'da ma amatani wa ilayhi nushur, but then he would recite from Ali Imran, which is in the hadith. He would recite the last from Inna fi khalqi samawati wal ardi ikhtilaf al-layl wan nahar. He would look up at the stars. The Prophet used to nadhara fi an-nujum, and he would recite those verses. رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا سُبْحَانَكَ فَقِينَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. That's coming into consciousness. When making wudu, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Wudu is an act of ibadah that many people are deprived of because they do it only for the prayer. The Prophet ﷺ used to do wudu as an act of ibadah. When we first saw the people in Tuaymarat, the way they did wudu, Murabit al-Hajj did wudu, it was just amazing how he did wudu. And he would always, when he completed, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma ja'alni min at-tawwabin wa ja'alni min al-mutatahhirin. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdika wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. This was the dua on the completion of wudu. Allahumma ighfir li dhanbi wa wasi' li fi dari wa barik li fi rizqi. It was a beautiful dua. And that's wasi'li fi dari. A man can be in a cell, like Tobias Tubbs could be in a cell, and he's in an expansive place. Another person could be in a mansion and he's in a cell. Because it's subjective. It's all how you perceive reality. This is one of my favorite du'as. It's just such a beautiful du'a. And then when he got on a camel, which is taken from the Quran also, Alhamdulillah alladhi sakhara lana hadha wa ma kunna lahu muqrinin wa inna ila rabbina munqalibun. Always the akhirah. Because time for pre-modern people was always related to eternity. This is why when you eat, Alhamdulillah alladhi at'amani wa saqani wa arwani wa ashba'ani wa ja'alani min al-muslimin. The ni'mah baqiya is always mentioned with the ni'mah thaniya. Food is a blessing that dissipates, but submission to Allah is a blessing that goes on forever. This is also when leaving the home. Allahumma inni as'aluka. This is khayra mawlaj wa khayra al-makhraj. Bismika la-walaj. Now this is when you come into the house. Bismillah kharajna wa ala rabbina tawakkalna thumma liyusallama ala ahlihi. Coming into the home. When heading to the masjid, one of my favorite also. Allahumma ja'al fi qalbi noora, wa fi lisani noora, wa ja'al fi sam'i noora, wa ja'al fi basri noora, wa ja'al min khalfi noora, wa min amami noora, wa ja'al min fawqi noora, wa min tahti noora. Allahumma a'tini noora. And in a riwayah, Allahumma ja'alni noora. And he had no shadow. Ibn Hajar says he had no shadow. This is something that the Salaf said. He was always shaded by clouds. But he had no shadow, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. One of the proofs of his hairs are if you cast a light on them, they don't show shadow. Allahumma ja'alni noora, make me light. God placed light in my heart, light on my tongue, light in my hearing, light in my sight, place light behind me, light before me, place light above me, light below me. Oh God, make me light, grant me light. When entering the masjid, Allahumma iftah li abwaba rahmatika. And then mindfulness, he entered with his right foot first and made this dua. When leaving the masjid, left foot, Allahumma inni asaruka min fadlika, because the rahmah is in the masjid, the fadl is in the world, the bounty of the world. When hearing the adhan, إِذَا سَمِعْتُمُ النِّدَاءَ فَقُولُوا مِثْلَ مَا يَقُولُ الْمُؤَذِّنُ. And then when you finish it, Allahumma rabba hadihi ad-da'wata at-tamma was-salati al-qa'ima ati Sayyidina Muhammadan. Sayyid, the Prophet ﷺ is our Sayyid. Most of these riwayahs have without the Sayyid, but it's been the urf of the Muslims to say Sayyid. Our Prophet ﷺ, just out of adab to him. I mean, there's a position, and this is a position that's a totally valid position, that it's also the adab to do it just as it came down. And there are people that do that. So both are correct, but I've always found it difficult not to say Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah says, don't call him like you call other people. You know, one of the tragedies of the modern time is first name. Everybody's on a first name basis. You know, I hate these people, they call you up, hello Hamza. I'm like, it's Colonel Hamza to you. Yeah. You know, I mean, why do people assume that they can just call you by your first name? People used to take a long time before you gave them your first name. If you look at the old English like Jane Austen, they called people by their last name. Like Willoughby. That's not his name. His name was John Willoughby. But they called him Willoughby because he was called by his last name. And if it was an elder, then they would call them Sir or Mr. We say Abu Yahya, Abu Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You give kunya. That's how the Arabs do it. One of the things that I realized, because I went to a Catholic school in high school, and they always called you by your last name. This was, early 70s, so it hadn't changed yet to the degree. They always called you by your last name. So, if you raise your hand, they say Mr. Hanson. That's how they called you. And my father went to the same school. And what I realized later is that the whole purpose of that is that you don't just represent yourself, you represent a family. You have a family name, that you shouldn't dishonor your family name. So we're in a time when it's just everybody's an individual. They no longer have any sense of being part of a family or a community. So it's one of the tragedies, I think, of all this familiarity. And then, Allahumma hada iqbaru laylika wa idbaru naharika wa aswatu du'atika faghfir li. Forgive me. This, oh God, now is the arrival of your night, the departure of your day, and the sound of your caller, so forgive me. Imam al-Bukhari. Bismika alladhi la ilaha illahu. When on to go to the bath or sleep. Bismillah, Allahumma jannibna shaitan wa jannib shaitan ma razaqtana. In the name of Allah, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا أَرَادَ أَنْ يُلَامِسْ أَهْلُهُ. If you're going to be intimate, then this is something to say to protect the child. أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من غضبه وشر عباده ومن همزات الشياطين وأن يحضرون. If you wake up from a fright, you say this in sleep. There are many, many of these. I mean, we have beautiful books. Imam al-Shawkani wrote a fantastic book, Tuhfat al-Dhakirin. Imam al-Nawawi's great book, Al-Adhkar. It's one of the finest books in our tradition. There are many, and many, many scholars have written small books, like this one that my teacher wrote. they want the barakah of teaching these things to people. So it's why people write tajweed books. Like, it used to really bother me, tajweed books. Like, I see all these tajweed books. They're all the same. They say the exact same thing. They're all little books, and they say the exact same thing. And I would like, why do people keep writing tajweed books? Like, aren't there enough tajweed books? And then I realized it's actually a brilliant thing to do, because anybody that learns how to read the Quran from that book, the author of that book gets the reward of all their recitation. So this is why shuyukh always made their own awrad. That's I realized that, because I was like, why do they keep making new awrad? Because they want the reward of the people doing the dhikr that they put together. It's one of the blessings of our religion. So I totally have no problem anymore with that, because I get it. I want to do it. Like, I'm going to write a book on tajweed, inshallah. Allahumma aghfir li dhanbi kulluhu diqqahu wa julluhu wa awwaluhu akhiruhu wa alaniyahu wa sirruhu. Oh Allah, forgive my sin. This is in prostration. Forgive my sins entirely, the lesser and the greater, the first and the last, the revealed and the concealed. He also said, there are many, many beautiful iterations. Allahumma aghfir li warhamni wahdini wajburni wa'afini warzuqni. One of the things of the afiyah, one of the meanings of it, according to Imam al-Qushayri, was to be focused on God. In other words, not to be distracted, which I thought was really interesting. Humma inni zalamtu nafsi zulman kathira. This is between the tashahhud and the salam again, between the tashahhud and salam. And these are what are called the baqiyat al-salihat. My recommendation to all of you, do the baqiyat al-salihat. This is one of the most important things that you do after your prayer, is the baqiyat al-salihat. These are the things that you say after the prayer. There are different iterations, but they're very beautiful and they're extremely important. There's a whole bunch of them. So these are, and we're actually this is going to be published this month and given to all the 12,000 strong people and then just made available. But there are good books like this. There's a beautiful one that White Thread Press did, the Precious Pearls, Reflections from the Precious Pearls. It's a beautiful book that a really fine sheikh from England did. So there are many good books, and the khair of Allah is without limits. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-jubni wa a'udhu bika min al-bukhli wa a'udhu bika min an uradda ila ardhil al-umr. This is a very important hadith given dementia, Alzheimer's, all these things are so prevalent. Wa a'udhu bika min fitnat ad-dunya wa adab al-qabri. So, oh Allah, verily I seek refuge in you from timidity and stinginess. So fear, jubn is like fear. Wa a'udhu bika min al-bukhli. Bukhl is related to fear because you're afraid to give out your money. And in one, it's min al-ajzi wal kasal. So the ajiz is the one who wants to do something, but they can't. The kaslan is the one who is able to do it, but doesn't want to do it. So he sought refuge from both. These are really stunning in their meaning. So these are, and then the dua from anxiety. Allahumma inni abduka ibnu abdika ibnu amatika nasiyati biyadika maadin fiya hukmuka. عدل في قضاؤك أسألك بكل اسم هو لك سميت به نفسك وأنزلت في كتابك أو علمت أحد من خلقك أو استأثرت به في علم الغيب عندك أن تجعل القرآن العظيم في ربيع قلبي ونور صدري وجلاء بكلاهما. There's slight difference but essentially the same meaning. وجلاء or جلاء حزني وذهب همي وغمي. So again, a beautiful comprehensive dua to make the Quran the rabi' of your heart. And one of the best ways that you can honor your Prophet ﷺ is to read the Quran. The Prophet said the best ibadah of my ummah is Quran in prayer, and then Quran outside of prayer. This is the best ibadah that you can do. If you're not doing a juz of Quran a day, and you're doing other things, I would set aside those other things and focus on doing a juz a day. Every Muslim should do a khatam of Quran every month. I mean, this is baseline. And it'd take about half an hour. You could do 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening. Once you get accustomed to reading it at a relative pace, it's, what do you say? Qari Omar. Yeah, How fast can you do with hadar? How? Yeah, about 20. Yeah, so if you do hadar, you can do it in 20 minutes. So 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the, this is not a lot of your time. It's, and the book, it's so neglected, and the Prophet complained of its neglect. My people have abandoned this Quran. And one of the great blessings of Morocco, and one of the things I love about that country, is every masjid, 250,000 khatam every year, every month. That's what the Ministry of Awqaf has determined, based on all the hizb. Subhanallah. So this is a beautiful dua. And then istikhara is very important. He used to teach istikhara for everything. And this is something, I'll tell you a true story. Sheikh Abdullah bin Bayya was in Jordan, and they were on their way. It was very late at night, and they were on their way to the airport, and the driver fell asleep and crashed into a telephone pole. He died. The Sheikh Abdullah broke his nose, and there was blood everywhere. And his son, and this is a true story, his son told me this. He was in the car, and his son started screaming because he was worried his dad was seriously injured. He was actually, it wasn't that bad of an injury, but because there was so much blood, he thought it was really serious. He screamed, and he said his father took his arm, squeezed it, and said, "Labas, astakhartullah. Don't worry, I did istikhara before this trip." That's the power of this. That's the power of the prophetic teaching, is that you are in the hub, you're in that place where you're not perturbed by the world. And things are going to get very serious on this planet. We're entering into a new phase, and people need to have strong iman, and they need to be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They need to be connected. I mean, one of the things about Edith Stein that was so amazing, she actually, when she fled to after Kristallnacht, when they were persecuting the Jews, she fled to, they took her to Belgium. And she was in a monastery there. And she used to go out into the cold like she was preparing for something. And this is eyewitness people that saw this. She was taken to Auschwitz when the Nazis invaded, and they took even the converts to Catholicism, because she had converted out of Judaism to Catholicism. But she took her to Auschwitz. There were eyewitness accounts that she was comforting people in that situation. And she only was there for 1 week. She was killed right away. But the point is that people of Iman can deal with this. When people don't know this, but in Korea, when they captured the Americans, they captured Turks with them. So they were actually imprisoned together. And when they studied, the Americans all fell apart, and they actually started doing recordings for the Koreans, like communist propaganda. And they were very worried about this because they felt they were brainwashed. It was all from the interrogation, but the Turks didn't. They didn't succumb to the interrogation. And they wanted to understand why. And what they found out was two things that the Turks did. One, they laughed a lot because they saw the ridiculousness of what they were trying to do in the brainwashing. So they just would watch these people telling them these things, and they thought it was funny. And I know that that's from a type of iman, where you kind of recognize the hilarity of this dunya and the stupidity of human beings. And I know it had to do with their upbringing as Muslims. The other thing that they did, they always appointed, because they would take away the officers and the morale would break down with the Americans. The Turks always appointed an amir. So they always, even if it was a private, they would appoint somebody over them, and he would keep them all together. So these are really, really important things to remember. We need to be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.